What's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And today, let's talk a little bit about public accommodations, trespassing, racial discrimination, and weird cop apologists on YouTube. So if you don't know, Starbucks had a nationally recognized incident, and it's always great if you're like the manager of a local Starbucks working real hard to do your job, and whatever you do ends up on the national news painting you and your establishment as horrifically racist. And I am not going to comment on whether or not Starbucks or the manager or anyone involved in this situation is racist in particular. You know, I don't know any of these people. I don't know anything about them. And I don't really care whether they're racist or not. The question is, are they legally able to do what they did? And what is the fallout from this? I think that's what's most interesting to me. And hopefully that's interesting to you guys who are watching this channel. So tonight I'm drinking jewelry. That's this guy. But due to being completely inept at running my recording software, it is already poured. So here we go. Let's take an overview of the situation, and then we're going to talk about it. We'll talk about the laws that are out there, and we're going to respond to a certain YouTuber by the name of Donut Operator, who I know lots of people are fans of. And I don't have anything against him or anything like that, but we'll have to see if I agree or disagree with his conclusions. So here we go. Starbucks apologizes for treatment of black patrons. Police go on the defensive as an activist call for justice. Who cares what headlines are? Let's get to some details here. So in the video, just posted to Twitter Thursday by Philadelphia resident Melissa DePino, two black men can be seen being escorted out of the coffee shop in handcuffs. Customers can be seen and heard telling officers that the men did nothing wrong. This is important. Okay. Included with her tweet, DePino wrote, "The police were called because these men hadn't ordered anything. They were waiting for a friend to show up who did, as they were taken out in handcuffs for doing nothing." Also important. If you notice, I'm going to say everything I highlighted is important because I highlighted it because I thought it was important. So then stakeholders have responded. Police commissioner says officers did nothing wrong. That's not much of a surprise. That's his job. It shouldn't be important to note, but some people believe it's important to note that the police commissioner is black. Donut Operator makes it very clear that the police commissioner is African American, and therefore I guess his opinion on the matter holds more weight. I don't know. I was talking with with one of my friends who's black who had choice words for the police commissioner. You can probably imagine. So I don't think the blackness of the police officer has anything to do with whether or not this was a proper removal of people from a Starbucks. But we'll see. The employees told the officers the two men wanted to use the restroom, but were told the facilities are only for paying customers. Starbucks employees then asked the men to leave, but they refused, Ross said. Okay, Ross is the police chief. So bear in mind, you're getting a biased perspective from the police chief, bias in favor of the police. And I'll talk about one of the public things that we know that'll show you that this is a little bit slanted, and that's okay. That's okay. It's to be expected. But I have a question for you. How many of you have gone into a Starbucks without paying and either used their bathroom or sat down at a table and just hung out? Maybe you're meeting someone. Maybe you weren't. I have a friend who used to do a lot of work at either a Starbucks or a Caribou, and I don't drink coffee, and I would go in and hang out with him for a while, and I wouldn't buy anything. He would from time to time. I don't know if he always did, but it's not unusual to go into a coffee shop, a place that offers seats, Wi-Fi, relative quiet. It's often seen as a space for people to work and gather and meet people, right? It's a coffee shop. You go meet people at a coffee shop, and not everybody's purchasing something. So and I think this is kind of indicative with some of the reactions from the crowd. But let's go on. So officers responded and asked the men to leave 3 times. Politely to leave the location because they were being asked to leave by employees because they were trespassing. When the men again refused to leave, they were arrested without incident. Well, yeah, and I guess if police officers show up and ask you politely to leave somewhere, whether you have to leave or not, you should automatically do it. And that's the implication. I don't know that that's correct, though. The men were taken to a police station and released when it became clear Starbucks didn't want to press charges. That was 8 hours after being arrested. So that's what I'm talking about when the officer is, just going ahead and, oh, it's no big deal. We just put them in handcuffs in public. We just escorted them out of the building. We put them in the back of squad cars. We drove them down to the police station. We took fingerprints of them, did the full booking process, and then we released them 8 hours later, holding them in a jail cell, presumably for those 8 hours. But nothing happened. It's fine. It was without incident. They were released as soon as Starbucks decided they didn't want to press charges. Right, they're not being charged, but you arrested 2 guys in public and brought them to a police station to sit for 8 hours. I don't know if you guys have ever had to sit somewhere for 8 hours. Wait, I do. Most of you have been to public school and you didn't want to be there. Being somewhere for 8 hours isn't fun. And it's usually not, what your planned day is, especially if it's jail. So they did a service that they were called to do, Ross said, of the officers, and that might be true. And if you think about it logically, just logic, remember, that if a business calls and says that there's someone here I no longer wish to be in my business, officers now have a legal obligation to carry out their duties, and they did just that. Let me paint a hypothetical for you. You're a business owner, and you, every time you see black people, call up the police and say, I don't want these people in my establishment. At that point, you're not actually within the law to do so. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's what happened in the Starbucks, and certainly they don't kick out every black patron because they'd be in the news constantly if they did. Certainly not. However, there is a limit to the power of police to enforce a trespass. And usually, you can't just kick anybody out of a public place. This is the trick here. This is a public business, and there are protections for people being in public business, for better or worse. For better or worse. I don't necessarily agree with all of these things, but this is the current state of the law. So let's get through this article. Sorry, there's a couple more. I'm trying not to tangent too much. I hope so. This is where the Starbucks CEO comes out and makes as many statements as he can to give his lawyers heart attack, okay? Starbucks stands firmly against discrimination and racial profiling. Johnson, the CEO of Starbucks, Kevin Johnson, he said in a statement Saturday, I hope to meet personally with the 2 men who were arrested to offer a face-to-face apology. Well, that's the first issue. Johnson said Starbucks practices and training led to the bad outcome with the 2 men being arrested. He's just throwing out admissions of liability here on Starbucks, which is not the proper legal tack to take. The basis for the call to the Philadelphia Police Department was wrong. Our store manager never intended for these men to be arrested, and this should never have escalated as it did. Now that's important. Okay, so if the basis of the call was wrong according to Starbucks policy or whatever, or their training, who knows, that's fine. But saying that's a Starbucks issue, but this is a police issue. Our store manager never intended for these men to be arrested, and this should never have escalated as it did. Well, what did he intend? I guess I shouldn't assume it's a he or she. What did they intend when they called the police? And what did they say to the police when they got there? We want these guys arrested. We don't want these guys arrested. We just want them out. What is it? What happened? And that information is stuff that we don't really have. We do have information about the patrons saying that these men did nothing wrong. And that's an interesting and important perspective, because if the patrons think that these men did nothing wrong, then they're acting completely within what's expected behavior at a Starbucks, which is to go in, sit down, hang out, You maybe have a drink, you maybe don't. Earlier, the company tweeted an apology saying, "We take these matters seriously and clearly have more work to do when it comes to how we handle incidents in our stores." Get out the checkbook, Starbucks, because if these guys' attorney is doing their job, you're writing checks to them. And you maybe should. Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney said Starbucks' apology is not enough. I don't even know what that means. I thought it was funny because, okay, what do you want them to do? They want to review, they want the Philadelphia Commission on Human Rights to examine the firm's policies and procedures, including the extent or need for implicit bias training for its employees. I mean, okay, sure. So this is the Starbucks apology, or the Starbucks apology and all that stuff. Let's look at the laws real quick. Here's the trespass. So we have a couple different sections to go through, and it mainly is this defiant trespass. But let's go with criminal trespass. First, buildings and occupied structures. A person commits an offense if, knowing that he is not licensed or privileged to do so, he enters, gains entry by subterfuge, or surreptitiously remains in any building or occupied structure or separately secured or occupied portion thereof, or breaks into any building or occupied structure separately secured or occupied portion thereof. So this is gain entry by force or by some sort of coercion, surreptitiously, or subterfuge. This isn't what we're looking for, right? Not at all. So we're looking at defiant trespasser. A person commits an offense if, knowing that he is not licensed or privileged to do so, he enters or remains in any place to which notice against trespasser is given by 1. Actual communication to the actor. So this is the theory that they're going for on the trespass. They're saying, I can't highlight that properly. They're saying basically the Starbucks employees telling them to leave says that the actor has been given actual communication by the person, the rights holder or a representative of the rights holder, and it's been communicated to them that they are no longer allowed to remain. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Or by posting in a manner prescribed by law. So this would be a sign or something like that. Fencing or other enclosures manifestly designed to exclude intruders. This is obviously not the case. Notices posted in a manner prescribed by law or reasonably likely to come to the person's attention at each entrance of school grounds. So that's not important. Actual communication of the actor leaves school grounds. That's not important. Okay, so except as provided in paragraph 1b, an offense under this subsection constitutes a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree if the offender defies an order to leave personally communicated to him by the owner of the premise or other authorized person. Okay. So that's the trespass. There's defenses to this. It is a defense to prosecution under the section that 1, a building or occupied structure involved in an offense under the subsection of this section was abandoned. Or 2, the premises were at the time open to members of the public and the actor complied with all lawful conditions imposed on access to or remaining in the premises. So they automatically have a defense. What's the lawful condition imposed on access to or remaining in the premises? Starbucks, if this were adversarial, Starbucks and the police would be arguing that it was their refusal to buy something would have meant that they were not compliant with the lawful condition. The lawful condition of remaining on the premise would be a purchase. That's going to be hard to prosecute because, like I said, lots of people go into Starbucks and are not removed for purchasing. What makes these two guys special? What makes it different now? Why are we imposing this condition? Would a reasonable person find this condition to be imposed upon them? There's lots of arguments, but this is a court argument, okay? This is not necessarily an argument you make at the location. This is an argument, a defense that you make in court when you've been charged with a crime. They weren't charged with a crime here, so they're not going to have to defend themselves under the statute. But let's just say they would have a defense under the statute. More importantly, this is Title 43, Section 953 of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, Chapter 17. So this is labor laws and public accommodations. So this is the opportunity for an individual, we're right here, to obtain employment for which he is qualified and to obtain all and to attain all of the accommodations, advantages, facilities, and privileges of any public accommodation and of any housing accommodation and commercial property without discrimination because of race, color, familial status, religious creed, ancestry, handicap, or disability, age, sex, national origin, the use or guide of a guide or support animal because of the blindness, deafness, or physical handicap of the user, or because the user is a handler and trainer of support or guide animals, is hereby recognized as and declared to be a civil right which shall be enforceable as set forth within this act. This means that you cannot throw people out of a business for any of these, here's my finger, for any of the qualifications that are written there. Race, color, familial status, religious creed, etc., etc. If you do, you get sued, right? This is what's happening with bakers of cakes. If you, based on sexual orientation or sex or any of those sorts of qualifiers, refuse to provide the full accommodation, which means to make a specific wedding cake, then you are in violation of the Human Rights Act. Human Relations Act, we'll say, in Pennsylvania. Minnesota would be the Human Rights Act. It's each state has their own Human Rights Act. So in this case, if they established that they were being excluded because they were black, then they very much have a case against them for racial discrimination. And I think that they probably do. I think Starbucks knows it. I think that's why the CEO probably isn't too afraid of making these public statements. And I think he's going to be writing checks to these guys pretty quickly. So the long and short of that is, yes, you can ask someone to leave. You can ask someone to leave your property. Even as a business, you can ask someone to leave your property. However, if you're asking them to leave on the basis of their race or color or national origin or something like that, you're in violation of the law at that point, and you can't do that. At that point, you cannot do so. So, Donut Operator has a hot take on this. Let me pull him up here. There's his face. Good face, buddy. And let's see. I'm going to go through a couple different segments of his thing and respond accordingly. But here we go. And I'll include a link to this video down in the description so that you can check out the full thing, because I am clipping him. I don't believe I'm clipping him out of context. If you think I am, go ahead and leave a comment about it. But I don't believe so. So here we go.
I don't want to make this video because it's so stupid. People can't understand simple laws and procedures that are in place to keep other people from being on your property if you don't want them to be there. It's called trespassing. And if a company has private property, and it works the same way for your house, has private property and they say, I don't want you here anymore, and you don't leave, then they can call the police, and it's the police's duty to remove them from your property. It's that simple. It is so simple, but by God, it is so easy to say, oh, well, police are just racist. You guys.
Okay. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. And of course, I'm a lawyer. I'm going to make things as complicated as possible. That's my job, is to live in the gray area of the law. If you're at home asking someone to leave, yes. If your doors are open to the public, no. No, you cannot just ask someone to leave. You have to have a basis for doing so. And, I'm sorry. That kind of worked out weird that you guys would see me scrolling through the video. Didn't occur to me. If you're asking someone to leave, you have to have a lawful reason to ask them to leave, not an unlawful one. Now, it's possible that the request was lawful here. We don't actually have all of the details. We just have various perspectives on the story. But I'm telling you, as an attorney, if I were representing these guys, the perspective would clearly be that they did nothing wrong. They were acting in a matter according to the way people act in a Starbucks. We have corroborating information on that from other Starbucks patrons who said they did nothing wrong. So therefore, they were acting within the expected norms. Why are these guys being singled out to leave in a public place? It kind of looks like it's because they're black. It just kind of does. I'm not sure. Without some sort of activity that they engaged in where they were disrupting people, where they were disrupting the flow of business, It's really hard to make that argument. Let's see what he says next.
According to reports, there were two black guys sitting in a Starbucks. They wanted to use the restroom. The Starbucks employees said, well, those restrooms are only for paying customers. They said no. That means now they're trespassing. That's illegal. The police show up to do their job.
Did they have a sign saying they're for paying customers only? There's a big difference there. Because again, so the way Civil Rights Act stuff works out is it's a civil matter. Human Rights Acts, I should say. The Human Rights Act stuff is a civil matter. So whether or not they said the reason was because, well, you know, bathrooms are for paying customers only. Was it posted? Do other people come in there and use the bathroom? Have these guys been in there without paying before and used the bathroom? If two people are sitting down, only one person buys coffee, can the other person use the bathroom? These are hard questions that really start to matter in a situation like this. Because I don't know if I made it clear in the article, they were waiting for a friend. Now, that friend happens to be a real estate developer, apparently. According to a different article, it's not in the one I read. There's a real estate developer. He's meeting the guys there to discuss business opportunities. $5 says he's going to buy them whatever drink they want on the menu. Okay. Maybe that's why they didn't buy coffee. Maybe not. Maybe they're like me and they just don't like it. That's fine. But just saying that restrooms are for paying customers only, well, maybe they're about to be a customer when their other party gets there. They don't actually know that. We don't know if there's a discussion that happened, but I guarantee you if this goes to a civil case, all of those discussions are going to matter a lot really quickly.
They didn't run in there and throw handcuffs on them. They asked them several times nicely to leave, and they...
It's moving the Overton window, but he's responding to other people saying that the cops are acting in a racist way. I don't know if it's entirely fair to call the cops racist, although I would say the arrest is a problem, especially because we know that the person they're meeting shows up while they're being arrested and says, no, wait, I'm meeting these guys here right now. And people around are saying they didn't do anything wrong. Why are you arresting them? Why are you arresting them at that point?
Told the police no. Trespassing. They were placed in handcuffs, taken down to the police station. Starbucks said they didn't want to press any charges, and they were released. It's the same thing.
8 hours later.
If a person walked into your front yard and you said, hey, leave, and they said no, and you called the police, and the police showed up and said leave, and they said no, and they get arrested, that's trespassing.
It's not the same thing. It's not at all, because my house, my yard is not a place of public accommodation. You stop telling people the wrong thing, Donut. You know that this isn't true. You know there's a difference between a personal property and a business property that's open to the public. I mean, I hope you do. If you're a cop, you better. All right, let's get to the next spot. Sorry. Okay.
The point is, they didn't want them there. They didn't want to leave. The police tried to make them leave. They still wouldn't leave. They were arrested. It's not a difficult or racist concept. Philadelphia.
It can be a racist concept. If you go back to 1960 or 1958, a lot of businesses didn't want people there and would ask them to leave. And we decided as a society that that was wrong because of the reasons they asked them to leave. And again, it's hard to know specifically what the reason is because we're not in the mind of the person. So all we can do, and all anyone in the situation can do, is take a step back and say, what's going on in this scenario? Why are they being asked to leave? If people in the store are confused why someone's being asked to leave, that makes it look like a problem. That makes it more of a problem for Starbucks, for the arresting officers. I got one more clip of this guy, and I'm pretty sure he's saying basically the same thing. That was him. I'm not going to play the police chief comments because they're like 14 hours long. Not really, even though he sped him up. They're still pretty long, though. And the police chief is not important here.
I'm here to stand up for the police officers because they were just there.
I'm here to stand up for the police officers, he says. And so that's the perspective you need to take. He is standing up for the police officers. He is a police officer. That's his bias coming through, and that's okay. It's okay to have bias, even if it makes you wrong, Donut.
Doing what they were supposed to do because Starbucks didn't want those two gentlemen there, and the two gentlemen refused to leave. They were asked nicely by Starbucks employees. They were asked nicely by the police officers. They still didn't want to leave, and that's what happens. If you're
Listen, pal, you can ask nicely all day, but if you don't have the lawful grounds to ask in the first place, or if your reason for doing so is unlawful, maybe that's a more precise way. If your reason to ask someone to leave is unlawful, like because they're black, or because they're quote-unquote intimidating, or because they quote-unquote look like thugs, or some sort of other, I hate to use the term dog whistle, because I really don't agree with that sort of concept, but if there's something about these guys that they just can't put their finger on, and it might just be because they're black, then you don't have a lawful reason to ask them to leave. And we don't know what conversation happened between the gentleman and the Starbucks employees, but if everyone around is alarmed that these guys are being arrested, it might be because they didn't think that the Starbucks employees were doing the right thing, or that they had any reason to ask these guys to leave. So, listen, this video is like 15 minutes longer than I wanted it to be, but these aren't simple issues. Donut is wrong. Let me do him some justice and remove his weird looking. I caught him in a weird spot. It's not fair to him. I'll remove his face from the stream, from the video. Okay. They're not simple situations. Not at all. They're very complex situations. The police come in with limited information. They arrest the guys. The real question for the police, is, would they have arrested these guys if they were white? Would they have arrested these guys if they were in suits? Would they have arrested these guys if the guy they were meeting came to meet up, they were white males or they were females, and the guy says, hey, no, I'm meeting these guys. I'm going to buy coffee for everybody and we're all good. At that point, did they make the arrest? Because they seem to have made the arrest while the other party was there to meet with the guys. And at that point, the officer should take a step back and say, are we doing the right thing here? Is arresting these guys the right answer? Maybe they escort them out of the property. That's fine. Maybe, might be fine. But arresting them, taking them to the station, holding them for 8 hours, this is a step this is where it starts to look like, and I'll tell you, like, it's not my opinion. This is where it starts to look racist to people who have experienced racism. And that's obvious. You've got lots of protest groups coming out saying this is wrong. I can tell you again from personal experience, a friend of mine who is African American was talking to me about this, said the whole situation was wrong and that he's experienced stuff like this before. Numerous times. So, who knows? My point is, it is complicated, but you can't just ask anybody to leave as a place that's open to the public. When you open your doors to the public for business, for better or worse, the law that we have now says you have some reduced freedoms at this point. You have reduced your liberty in exchange for being a business open to the public. When you open yourself for commerce, you now have to abide by various the Human Relations Act of Pennsylvania, for example. You have to, if you're a Pennsylvania business that's open to the public, you can't deny people on the basis of race, color, skin color, national origin, or sex, sexual orientation, stuff like that. You can't do it anymore. So anyway, I hope you guys find this somewhat informative. I don't know. Starbucks is on the hook, maybe writing checks. Philadelphia police might also be on the hook, might be writing checks. The question is, did they have any justification for actually making the arrest? Responding to the call, fine. But when they get there and start learning more facts, start interviewing people around, find out these guys aren't violent, find out that these guys aren't being boisterous or loud or disruptive, and find out that the guy that they're meeting shows up, that's at that point where they have to take a step back. And what it doesn't mention here in this article is that 6 police officers show up to arrest these 2 guys also, which I hate to play a numbers game. I hate to, Monday morning quarterback, whatever happened. 6 officers showing up to arrest 2 guys without any indication that they've been unruly might be. It's the perception. It's the public perception. It's the perception of people who have been victimized in the past that's going to really matter for these officers and for this company in this situation. So, anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy the show. If you do, check me out, patreon.com/Lawsplaining, or just drop comments in the videos, like, share, favorite, subscribe, all that stuff that everybody asks all the time. Anyway, thanks a bunch. Have a nice night. Peace.